one more deep inhale. And then exhale. And let's make this one count, okay? Really deep inhale. Long exhale. Alright. How's everyone feeling? Feel better? Yeah? Alright, that was amazing, Kirtan. Thank you to all the musicians too. I mean, sometimes the singer gets credit, but the musicians make it happen too, so thank you so much. Alright. So I'm super excited to be here. I'm repping my UCLA shirt. I don't actually go there, I just like to wear the merchandise. How many of my UCLA people are in the house? Oh yeah, they'll politely like put up their hands. It's me. They're just like, woo! It's just like, hello, it's me. I have arrived. I am here now. Thanks so much, guys, for having me here. I am so excited to be here today because the talk is going to be really exciting today. The talk, if you didn't hear about from the flyers and the emails and whatnot, is getting rejected like a boss. Yeah, exactly. We're excited. This is good, right? Because usually rejection has this negative connotation to it. Comes from this place of like disempowerment or defeat, but we're going to turn that around today, and we're actually going to own it, and we're going to make it an integral part of growing and being a boss. So I'm super excited to talk to you about rejection today. Again, my name's Aastha, sounds like pasta, and I'm Canadian, so I might throw in some like A's, like I'm all about the A's. Might throw that in a couple times here. But I'm super, super excited. So we all get rejected. We all get rejected, right? Whether it's getting rejected from a love interest, or a job, or a school that we're applying to, or even if someone swipes left on Tinder, right? That's a matter of rejection. If any of you have a dating app out there, you've all gotten rejected, okay? Right? Someone has swiped left on you. So we've all got rejected at some point in our lives, right? And so, even like I'm from Canada, so I used to run this program called Food for Life in Toronto. I used to hand out meals to the homeless. And so one time I was handing out this meal, a box of fresh pasta. Pasta, like salad, like all the fixins, bananas, juice boxes, everything. And I handed it to this homeless man, and he was like, "Is there any chicken in it?" And I was like, "No, sir, it's not." He's like, "I don't want it then, bye." And I was like, I just got rejected from a homeless man, you know? I just got rejected from a homeless man. So like we all get rejected, right? To some point in our life, doesn't matter who we all get rejected. And so I want to take you through a couple tips that I've learned in my life. And again, it's a process, so I'm not saying that I'm an expert at it, but some tips that I've developed throughout my life, both practically and spiritually, for dealing with this emotion. Fair? So number one is we can't take it personally. And that is easier said than done, right? Because when someone says, "I don't want to be with you anymore," it's hard not to take that personally, right? When someone says, "I don't think you're qualified for this job," ooh, it's hard not to take that personally, right? So the key is to remember not to take things personally because there's a lot of different variables attached to a lot of our actions, right? There's so many different puppet strings in our lives and the things that we're going through. There's so many different things, right? So we might not get a job not because of anything that we've done. Maybe the interviewer was having a bad day that day, right? A pigeon just shat on his shoulder, right? We don't know what happened to the interviewer that day, right? Maybe they went with somebody internally and they decided to pay them less because they couldn't afford you. Maybe you were overqualified for that, right? But a lot of times in our life, we get into this what-if scenario of like, what if I wasn't good enough, right? But a lot of times there's so many different variables, so we don't actually know the whole story. And so a lot of times we can't see the big picture. We think we're the puppeteer of a lot of things, right? But when you indulge in a spiritual practice, you realize that you're not a puppeteer of anything, right? There's not a lot of things in life that we can control. So what can we control? We can control our thoughts, we can control our actions, and that's about it, right? Everything other than that, we can't control. And so it's a matter of taking it not personally. And so how do we do that? We have to remember two things. We have to remember that the situation is temporary, right? No matter what we're going through in life, or whatever the rejection is, it's temporary. It will go away, right? There's good times and bad times. How many of you have heard of the Bhagavad Gita before? All right, a few of you have. How many of you have never heard of it before, and it just sounded like a bunch of words that I made up? It's like a blah, blah, blah. Okay, a couple people, okay? So the Bhagavad Gita, if you've never heard of it, it is a really, really cool book, and if you want to pick it up, they're selling copies outside. Essentially, if you've never heard of it before, it's a conversation between two individuals. One is an enlightened being named Krishna, and the other one is his cousin, and his cousin's name's Arjuna. Arjuna kind of looks like, he has a mustache, he's just a mustache, and he's kind of a representation of us, right? He's asking Krishna the big questions in life, like, what is my purpose here? What am I supposed to do here? How do I control this crazy mind of mine? How do I get extra guac without paying $2? No, he didn't ask Arjuna. He didn't ask Krishna about how to get extra guac. But he asked a lot of those big questions, right? Those big questions that we tend to ask ourselves during those existential moments of our life, right? And so Krishna responds and says, like good times and bad times are kind of like the winter and the summer seasons. They come and go, right? Rejection is like one of those bad times that comes and goes. So we have to remember, in order to not take it personally, we have to remember that this is temporary. The second thing is to not let it define us. A lot of times when we get into those like the bottom of the dumps type of moods and we're like, oh my God, I'm not good enough to do this, we let it define us. We say, this is who we are. We're just a failure. We just got rejected. So the key is to remove yourself away from it, because we're coming from a place of ego then, right? We're coming from a place of like, this is who I am, I got rejected, and now I'm a failure, right? So just remember those two things. Understanding that the situation is temporary and that it doesn't define you. And so a lot of times we ask, like when we're at the bottom of the dumps, we ask ourselves this question is, why is this happening to me, right? How many of you have asked that question at one point in your life for something that has happened, right? Why is this happening to me? A way to practically and spiritually to deal with failure and rejection is to turn that around and say, what is this situation trying to teach me, right? Because when you change it from like a disempowered position to an empowering growth position, right? Why is this happening to me? To what is this trying to teach me? And when we start to change that, the entire situation changes as well. And so I want to give you a little story about how I had to learn rejection in my life. And so I've been doing stand-up comedy since like 2010, I believe, which is math, 9 years, right? Yeah, okay. I've been doing stand-up comedy for 9 years. And so I've been lucky enough to have a really good career doing that, and I've traveled the world, traveled to Hong Kong, Miami, London, and I'm only telling you this because it took time to get to all of those places, right? So I want to tell you about the very first time that I bombed on stage, okay? Mm-hmm. So I was doing stand-up comedy. This was probably my third show ever, okay? I was fresh into it. It was 2010. Like Tamagotchis were still a thing, though. But it was really old. It was a really long time ago. And so I remember it was at this hipster club in Toronto, like 10 p.m. at night. Everyone's just like dressed in plaid. It was really, really hipster, little show, and everyone's just in like these. There's tiny little circular tables, and there's like a couple people around each circular table. Maybe like 15 people in the room. It was a Tuesday night. Like 10 o'clock or something, right? And they're not in a good mood because they're just, they're dressed in plaid, they're not having a good time. And I remember I wrote this brand new joke, okay? And this joke, it was now that I think about it was something stupid like, oh man, I'm not gonna eat Pringles anymore because the man on the Pringles can, the little cartoon, he kind of looks like Saddam Hussein, Like, it was just like this weird joke that at the time, I thought it was brilliant, okay? I was like, this is hilarious, And I hope every time you see a Pringles can from now on, I hope you think of me, and I hope you think of Saddam Hussein. Right, like, it was just like, at the time, I thought I was a genius, okay? And so I walked up on stage, I did a couple jokes, it worked out well, and then I did this one joke. I did the Saddam Hussein Pringles joke. And nobody laughed. And every single comedian, from like Russell Peters to Amy Schumer to Chris Rock, every single comedian remembers the very first time that they bombed on stage. They remember it because I remember telling that joke, nobody laughing, and my heart sank to the bottom of my stomach. And it was just like the most gut-wrenching feeling. And all I wanted to do was run off stage and to crawl into a ball and to never tell a joke again for the rest of my life. That's how petrifying that feeling was. And I still had like another 7 minutes to tell jokes, but I was just like, that moment felt like 10 years. You know what I mean? Have you ever been that place where you're like, something devastating happens and that moment feels like so long? That was that moment for me. And so I went home super frustrated that night. I was like, man, why didn't this go the way I planned? Like, I wanted people to laugh. Like, Saddam would say, this is genius. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, the hipsters not laughing. Oh my God, I was blaming hipsters. Like, I was just like so like agitated. My mind was agitated as to why things didn't go my way. And so it's only until years later I realized that that rejection and where that pain came from, it was because I was attached to a certain result, right? I was thinking, okay, I read a joke, say it out loud, people laugh, everyone's happy, right? I was attached to a certain expectation, right? But at the end of the day, I can't control anything, right? I can control how well I write my jokes, how well I deliver my jokes, but the moment the joke leaves my lips, I have no control over it whatsoever, right? So I want you to think about a time in your life where you planned something and it didn't go like anything like you expected, right? So I guess the formula for detachment is simple, right? And dealing with failure is simple. At the end of the day, all we can do is try our best, right? That's all we can really do in life, right? Plus, let go of the worry of the outcome. Because a lot of times that outcome is out of our hands. And that's how we deal with rejection, right? Trying our best in life, but letting go of that expectation. Things that we can't control. Is that fair? And so, one of the biggest life lessons in the ancient yoga text is actually of detachment, right? Not trying to control things, but just doing our best, doing our dharma, and just letting things go after that, right? We still have to show up and do stuff. We can't just be like, all right, I'm going to let things go and let everybody, you know what I mean? We still have to try, but at the end of the day, we're not in control of what happens afterwards. And so, just harping on the first point for a second, just understanding that when we get into that place of why is this happening to me, turning that around and to say, well, what is this trying to teach me, right? So that's the first one, not taking things personally. The second tip that I wanted to give for dealing with rejection was keeping yourself out of further rejecting environments, right? So sometimes when we get into this down at the dumps place of rejection, we're like, oh man, right? And then sometimes we get into further rejecting places. But the key is to put yourself, your body, and your spirit and your mind in environments that are productive and encouraging, and around people in your life that are also encouraging and productive to help build your confidence. Because that's the one thing that really, really shoots us down. Whenever we get rejected, our confidence, our self-esteem goes out the door, right? So it's important who you associate with to like build yourself back up. And I remember when I was when I was applying for university. So in Canada, it's a little bit different. When you're applying for university or college, you don't have to take SATs. You basically will like have to do really well in grade 11. Okay? So like your best 6 marks in grade 11 determine the rest of your life. And I wish I knew that. So you could basically get C's and D's in grade 9 and 10 and grade 12. But if you're a straight A student in grade 11, you can go to any university you want. It's actually great. It's very, like, healthcare, guys, and this system, it's a good reason to move to Canada. And so basically, I, like, took a lot of bird courses in grade 11. I took a lot of introduction to photography and introduction to parenting, just, like, really bird courses, and I did really well, right? But got a 72 in calculus. And in order for me to go into like the business programs that I wanted to go to, you needed at least an 85 in calculus, right? So rejection letter after rejection letter, right? The top University of Toronto, you know, like all like the top schools, rejection letter, rejection letter, rejection letter, right? And sometimes putting yourself in further negative environments is like sometimes like you're just around your family who can be like really, really a negative environment for you, right? And so sometimes it's like understanding that even like the people that you're closest to, you have to remove yourself from them because they're not helping your mental state during this time of rejection, right? So I remember my mom would be like, rejected again? What is this? And then she would just like literally just make comments like as these rejection letters were coming along. You'd be like the worst parenting ever. You know what I mean? Like I'd be like doing the dishes and she'd like walk from behind me and she'd be like, I hope you're ready to start flipping the burgers at Burger King. You know, like she would just like the worst mom jokes and like the most discouraging, right? And so I was like, Mom, it's fine, it's gonna be fine, I'm gonna be okay. And then she's like, get your apron ready, McDonald's is calling. I was like, what? I was like, so it's also important to recognize that sometimes those negative people can be in your family too, right? So surrounding yourself with people who are encouraging is very, very important. Also, limiting that social media usage, right? How many of you, and be honest, you are in a bad mood or something crappy happened in your life and you go on social media and you see everyone's great pictures, right? You see everyone's pictures of their fancy brunch or their vacation to Hawaii or they just got proposed to and they got proposed to on a mountaintop, right? And then there's a sunset in the background and there's flowers in the background and then there's like a cartoon polar bear that says, good job, you guys! You know, just like the most, that's like my fantasy, I don't know. But like, just like the most optimal setting on Instagram, and you're like, oh my God, like I have nothing compared to this person, right? How many of you have been there? Right? We've all been there, right? We've seen this like desirable life of everybody else, and we compare it to what's happening in our life right now, and that is like science has showed us, like research has showed us that that type of behavior actually leads to anxiety and depression. And that's why the biggest generation that has this anxiety and depression tendencies are Generation Z, right? So people who were born from the mid-90s to the early 2000s, they actually have the highest cases of anxiety and depression because this is their age. Like everyone in that age group is using social media, right? And so keeping yourself away from social media, or at least limiting your usage of it, right? Or only using it when you're feeling fantastic and great about yourself, right? The second thing is understanding that a lot of times rejection sucks and it just comes into our life and it's something that we can't control, but our healing is our responsibility, right? Our healing is our responsibility. And it's understanding like what you need to heal and to get out of that, right? Because hurt people hurt other people. And sometimes, and we've all been here, it's like when we're feeling crappy or down in the dumps, we tend to lash out on the people that we love the most, right? But it's a matter of being introspective and being like, okay, what do I do to heal this myself? And so that's number 2, keeping yourself out of further rejecting environments. Number 3, keep working hard. And I know that's easier said than done, but like keep working hard and keep trying. Because at the end of the day, it's like winter and summer seasons. These good times and those bad times, they come and they go. And so we also have to, in life, we also have to understand what's in our control and what's not, right? If it's in our control, then we have our we have our action plan. If it didn't work out, we revise our action plan and we try again. If it's in our control, fantastic. If it's not in our control, we have to be aware of it. A lot of times we get anxious and go crazy because we try to control things that are uncontrollable, right? So think about a life as like a time in your life where you've tried to control things, but you had to give up. You had to surrender because you realized, I can't do anything about this anymore, right? And so it's understanding when things aren't in your control, and it's also important to understand that fighting to control something that's beyond your control will only drive you crazy, right? It only drive you crazy. And so in the Gita, Krishna mentions something. He says, someone who isn't connected to a spiritual path or to the Supreme or something higher has a tendency, it's very hard for them to have a steady mind. It's very hard for them. Without a spiritual practice, it's very hard for you to have a steady mind. And without a steady mind, there is no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? Okay, so I'm going to repeat that one more time. Without a steady mind, there is no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? So I want you to throw out everything that you've learned about society and like happiness is the key to life. I think what actually is the key to life is finding peace, right? You can have all the material goods in the world and try to be happy, but if you're not mentally satisfied up here, none of it means anything, right? If you're not peaceful up here, none of it means anything, right? So I think what we're truly striving for in life is that mental peace. And so rejection actually really agitates our mind. It does, because we question everything, right? Someone breaks up with us. Like, well, was I not good enough? Was I not pretty enough, right? Was I not talented enough? We get rejected from a school. Was that application not good enough? Was my interview not good enough, right? Was I not good enough, right? And so rejection has this tendency to agitate the mind. But I think the key is when we're striving for this mental peace, understanding that rejection has this agitation, but understanding the solution is something spiritual, right? Understanding the solution is something that calms down the mind. And so Krishna also says we have to sort of be friends with our mind, right? Our mind can be our best friend or our worst enemy. So when we get to these places of like, am I good enough? Was I pretty enough? Was I qualified enough? It's like telling your mind to stop, back off, and then becoming friends with your mind, right? Speaking to your mind and yourself as if you were talking to your best friend who went through that same situation. A lot of times, we're our worst enemy in our lives, right? We're our worst enemy, and we talk to ourselves so badly, right? But it's a matter of, like Krishna says, befriending the mind, being the mind's best friend, and starting from there. And that's how dealing with rejection, it can sort of mitigate the agitation that brings on. Does that make sense? Okay, so, I want to turn to the audience for a moment, and I want to ask you guys of a time that perhaps you've been rejected and it was perhaps the biggest blessing of your life. Or if there was a time that you dealt with rejection in a way, in a spiritual manner that really, really helped. I don't know if JC is here today, but one of my good friends is JC, and the biggest thing I learned from JC was that the opposite of depression is expression. Do you guys remember when JC said that? I love when he says that, because it's true, right? And so feel free, Mantra House is a safe space to express, but has there any been a time where you've been rejected and ended up being the best thing that could have ever happened to you? Does anyone want to share? Radhesham.
I remember sometimes, like when I was a teenager, I was in some relationships with one girl, and I was like so enamored by her, but she rejected me like anything. And then later on, I just realized, wow, like if I had stayed in that situation, I would have been like a totally different person. You know, that kind of like perspective, like wow, if I was there, who knows where I would have been, you know, in 10 years, you know.
You wouldn't be here, that's for sure.
And we all need you here, so thank you for sharing that, Radhesham, right? Especially like with ex-boyfriends and ex-girlfriends. I know I've gone through this before. It's like, holy crap, when you feel rejected, it feels like the worst thing in the world, right? But it's also about training your mind to be like, no, I don't need this, right? It takes time. It takes time for that to happen, but everyone looks back at old boyfriends and girlfriends and they're like, oh man, I dodged a bullet on that one, right? Hopefully. Anybody else want to share a time? Yep.
I submitted a short story to a journal, and it was kind of like a in-class assignment, and it was like for like a university journal in like random Arkansas, and I got a letter back that they turned down my short story, and to their defense, I wasn't even that good of a writer. So I learned from it, and I ended up changing majors, and I don't regret it.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. It's a matter of like taking that position of like, we could be in that position of like disempowerment and like, oh, I can't believe I got rejected and going down the dumps into it. But if we turn it into a place of empowerment, be like, this was probably a good thing that happened to me. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else? Oh yeah. In the corner there?
Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Good.
Good.
How's your day? No.
Wonderful, actually. Thank you. When I was 18, I had gotten kicked out of the university that I was attending. And now that I have gotten through it, I realized that the environment that I was in and the habits and the way that I was treating my body was very, very poisonous and self-destructive. And had I remained on my own at that university, I would have damaged my body a lot worse than I had just in that 1 year.
Yeah.
So I was very grateful for the opportunity to be removed from the environment so that I can nurture myself a lot better than I was in that space.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that, right?
Thank you.
Sometimes we get forcibly removed out of environments or even kicked out of friend groups, right? But it was like ended up being the best thing because that association was just so terrible for us. And so I want to conclude by talking about the 3 things that we talked about today, right? So everybody remember the 3 tips for dealing with rejection like a boss. Number 1,
Don't take it personally.
not taking it personally, right? The second thing was, I don't even remember. Second thing was keeping yourself out of further rejecting environments, right? And the third, keep working hard, keep trying, right? And that's all we really can do. Rejection can agitate our mind. The one thing that I want to leave off by was rejection can agitate our mind, but this mantra meditation that we do as a group and the ones that we do solo. So if you're really excited about the kirtan, that's fantastic. If you want to further your practice in an individual sort of solo setting, we also have beads where you can chant the mantra on. So you can talk to me after, buy a set of beads outside. But I was listening to this lecture from this monk, and his name was Chandramouli Swami. And so what he said was, he basically said that the most important thing that you can do when you chant is to listen attentively, right? When you listen attentively, that's how you get the sweetness of the mantra. That's how you get the benefit of the mantra meditation. So I implore you during this next kirtan to just sit up nice and tall, take a deep breath, and you can close your eyes. If you've already memorized the mantra, fantastic. Feel free to close your eyes and listen to every single syllable, right? Because when we chant attentively and we sing loudly from our own heart, that's where we get the benefit of mantra meditation. And I hope these tips on rejection helped. So thank you so much for listening to me today. I really appreciate all of you. Thank you.